Waiting for Reverend Aaron Long to check in. Last time we studied Gresham Machen and the Auburn Affirmation, which was a mass defection from the Westminster Confession of Faith by the year 1924. 1,247 signators denying the basics of the Christian faith, or allowing alternate theories, as they called them, of the atonement, the virgin birth, miracles, and the like. And it was that which brought the Presbyterian Church down, and it became a massive turning point. Just sending a note to Aaron now. See what he has to say. I don't see him arriving. Oh, here he comes now. Okay, good.
Sorry, internet was acting funny.
Okay, we sometimes have some technical difficulties. Anyways, Aimee Byrd's 8th and final book has arrived. It's called Why Can't We Be Friends?, where she argues that a man and a woman who are unmarried, who are married, both are married, can get together for like a meal or go somewhere. And I'm not going to bother reading it. It's my final hoorah. I'm not going to waste any more time or any more money. I finished rereading.
You went farther than I did.
Yeah, I reread the wallpaper book for the 4th and final time. And I think what I'm going to do, just to save shelf space, is take them out to the rear of the property where I have a burn pit and use them to start, because I got about 60 trees on my property.
Yes, sir.
And that's why I kept my truck, was because when it gets ever windy, I always got branches that fall down. And every time I cut the grass, there's a chunk of a branch that has broken off. So I keep the burn pit in the back and burned a lot of stuff back there. But I think I'm going to take her books out back and use them for kindling fire.
Well, I'm sorry I've ran you down this rabbit trail, but I wanted to talk about it because I wanted to expose. I have a passionate love for the church, Donald. And it breaks my heart to see the church continually make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And what I see, it's why I wanted you to go through Machen and show everybody why Machen left the PCUSA. What were the reasons? I thoroughly appreciate you putting up the Auburn stuff, because I went back through and looked into that. The sad statement of affairs is the fact that, from what I've been able to dig up ever since Tuesday, is a lot of those people that signed it would have been solid confessional Christians that just did not want to look like they were bigoted or ignorant or anything like that.
That was the great mass of the moderates in the church. They didn't want to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And like Charles Erdman said in a letter to D.L. Moody, that nobody is won to Christ by controversies and controversialists. and he was taking a shot at Machen. But what that Auburn Affirmation does is put before us a 30-year history of continuous, repeated, observed, perceived decline and declension from the Westminster Standards.
But I want you to back up for a second. During that time period, this was happening all across the church.
Yeah.
All right. And I want you to look and see throughout all of this movement, the left won in every case but two. And those two cases were the Southern Baptists and the Missouri Synod Lutherans.
Right.
Now,
they did get to those ultimately in time, but
they have, but it's been in the second wave that is now consuming NAPARC that they've gotten to those. They did not win the first battle with those two people. And I'd like to today, if you don't, do you mind if I take the lead for today?
take the lead, and because you wanted me to do the setup with Machen and Auburn Affirmation, and I did that. It was going to do just maybe half of a segment the first time, but Machen Auburn took over. And
Machen is important, and he's a lot more important than people give him credit for, and he's more important than just to the Presbyterians, because Machen sets the example of how we should respond to these things. Because what ends up happening is that there is a small cadre of progressives that manage to get into the system. Those progressives, using some form of Alinskyite thought, which was going on even before Alinsky just gave it form, end up infiltrating and taking certain positions of authority. Then what ends up happening is they indirectly, purposefully indirectly, end up starting controversy.
Well, I told you that story about my dad at Knox College, this Canadian Presbyterian seminary.
Mm-hmm.
And they had already, this is the late 1940s, they had already admitted this Old Testament professor, PhD from Chicago, into and onto the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Had my dad not been defended, he might have been intimidated to go along with the Libo bunch.
Right.
Because I mean, it was a knockdown, drag out conflict.
But there is always a small cadre. It is never the majority that infiltrate. Go ahead.
I want to throw in, before we forget, the middle mass.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lee Gatiss, Church of England, a good Reformed Church of England man, Reformed as Reformed is. And he said that the Machenites failed to appeal to the moderates who didn't want to fight. I'm thinking of, forgetting the guy's name, he was at First Presbyterian Pittsburgh. He didn't want to divide in the church, so he stayed in, even though he was a ardent confessionalist. I'm just forgetting his name now. Maybe it'll come later. But he would be a fundamentalist. But Lee Gatiss argues that, and he did his THM at Westminster before his PhD at Oxford. He argues that it was the middle that didn't go in Machen's direction, but just stayed where they were. And over time, these libos
Well, the libos will boil the frog once they've taken power.
Right. Right.
And I know this because of the United Church of Christ. But I'll get to that part here in a second. What you end up having is a small vanguard cadre that enters into these denominations, and they purposefully stir up controversy and in the process make themselves look like victims to gain support. Therefore, anyone who speaks against them is seen as an aggressor. Even though they are the bad players in the game, they control the optics of the situation. Does that make any sense?
That's what sociopaths do. They play the victim card,
Right.
play
So
the pity card.
what you end up getting at the beginning of any scenario are the large group of moderates end up siding with them because they've been manipulated into that place.
Gotcha.
I would talk about this with Aimee Byrd because that's exactly what she did. There has always got to be in the back of her mind the understanding that she would eventually be sniffed out. But what she was able to do
is very careful.
Is to do enough damage in the process to call it all into question.
Yeah.
Look at the Episcopal, you've heard, I'll keep banging on this drum. Look at the Episcopal Church with the ordination of women. One bishop slipped it through without doing his due diligence, or maybe he did and he was just that bad of an actor. So it was, 14 women get ordained?
Yeah, 1976 in Philadelphia.
Right. Well, then by the end of 5 years, 7 or 8 of them come out of the closet as lesbians. So it is this purposeful manipulation that occurs. And it is done purposefully so they can win over the weak-minded moderates. And I'm going to call them the weak-minded moderates. This is where my steers and queers come in. Moderate.
Because Aaron, 98% of the people are busy going to jobs and raising families and going shopping and cutting
And that's
grass.
the laity, and absolutely.
And
this is where the steers in the pulpit come from. These men in the pulpit, the one you described, you can call him solidly confessional, whatever. I call him a Satanist. Because if he had the balls that God gave him, he would have stood up with Machen and condemned all of those demon worshipers to hell. I do not consider these moderate confessionalists to even be saved. I think they're liars, and I think that they're hired hands because they do not have the testicular fortitude God gave them to stand up and to be the shepherds God wants them to be. If they did, they would have called those liberal bastards out and had them excommunicated from the church. I have no use whatsoever at this point for OPC clergy, even if they did what was right in the end, because they should have burned that witch the moment she released that book, Yellowed Wallpaper, and they didn't. They do not have the balls to stand up against the devil. And if you do not have the balls to stand up against the devil, it means you do not have Christ in your heart.
In defense of the OPC, that's not how they operate. They are extremely slow, extremely cautious. They live out of the 9th commandment to not bear false witness. They're afraid of making mistakes. But in their defense, as they progress, and Machen was like this too, Machen didn't flip overnight. They finally ultimately get to it. They do due diligence. And I think in time they did sniff her out, and everybody dropped her in time.
Donald, all they had to do was read Yellow Wallpaper.
Yeah, but she's a slippery.
That book, slippery. But no, so are they just too stupid to read what's on the page? She basically lays it all out in that book.
No, she doesn't. She is serpentine.
Okay.
She
She
is,
lays it all out. And I know she lays it all out because she does the same thing that they did in the UCC. If they would have spent 5 minutes reading how this happened in the main line, they could have cracked the book up, read the first chapter and knew what she was doing.
I'm not sure if she was brought up in charges by the presbytery. I don't know.
She should have been excommunicated the moment that book hit the shelves, because any pastor who had actually done his reading should be able to see it. It's in every page of the book. I had to hear this crap all through seminary. I didn't need to read anything else she wrote because it was all in that book. Everything she wrote could have been taught by any of the progressive women pastors I had to sit under when I was in school. Her methodology, her whole approach, it was all there. So either they're ballless or they're stupid. I don't know which one it is. I get your need to defend them, but the facts are the facts. Had they actually spent, or they're arrogant, I could say they're arrogant, and they thought that what happened in the main line would never happen to them, so they never paid attention how these snakes got into the main line.
Well, even pastors are super busy with this, that, and the other.
I
Uh,
know,
I
and I
th
still read 20,000 pages a year.
um, I think Carl Truman got onto her, and he and Todd Pruitt, PCA man, dropped her from their podcast. So something was going on.
Then why did the OPC discipline the people that were calling her out?
Some of them did not proceed in the right way.
So their polity is more important than the truth. Because that's what that says to me.
Doing it the right way is important to them.
But that's saying that their idea of doing it the right way is more important than the truth itself.
Well, if you look at even how I have examined it, I've read all of her books. I've read them all 2 times, and the wallpaper book, 4 times? So I've taken my time, and I have seen how she has slowly built the case. And from wallpaper forward, you see increasing, still subtle, aggressiveness. So I think I've done enough due diligence so that I finally conclude she's a snake in the high grasses.
Okay. And Donald,
She could have been
were,
happy and quiet and worshipful and contributing to her church. And she has not been that. She's a troublemaker. She's a busybody, as Paul says, going around among weak women and telling stories that they shouldn't. She is that kind of a woman in a congregation, and she should be silenced or counseled to step back. And if not, then it comes
it's funny.
up,
You're proving the point I'm getting ready to make.
it comes to the point that the session should counsel her to be a gentle, meek Christian and support the confession.
And Donald, the role you play is incredibly important, and you did what a forensic theologian should do.
That's OPC training.
But here's the problem. Because of either stupidity, arrogance, or outright evil and acceptance of her position, they did not immediately censor her when the question came up. When the question that was brought to the floor by Spangler and some of them in the Southeastern Presbytery, Aimee Byrd should have been taken aside, told to quit writing, quit going on anything, quit pushing her books, quit everything until this case has been settled out and until wiser heads. I am not denigrating your position. You serve a necessary and valuable element in all this. It's the ballless wonders that would not shut her up.
They wouldn't take her out to the back burn pile.
Right. No, I am not saying she should have been immediately excommunicated until due process had occurred.
Right.
I am saying Paul said they need to be silenced.
Yeah.
They need to be shut up until because that's the thing. When they told Spangler to shut up, he did. They put him, he did exactly what he was asked to. He took his 2 years, even though it cost him his job, it cost him his livelihood, it cost him everything. He did his 2 years, but they didn't have, they're either too arrogant, too stupid, or too evil to see they should have told her to sit down and shut up.
That's the one thing I have not examined is the Presbyterian General Assembly. I didn't get into all that.
But this is sort of beyond the point. What I'm saying is, it is the ballless wonders, the steers of the middle ground that can say what they want to, but they're nothing more than hired hands because they don't have the courage to stand on their principles. I do not buy into somebody who is called to be the pastor giving me excuses as to why they may not know it. Donald, I have done this for 23 years, and I have had to hear every excuse in the world why people can't do this or why people can't do that. I homeschooled my daughter. I have maintained a marriage, and I have been bi and tri-vocational at times. But I have never once slacked off on my research, my reading, my continuing education, or any of my pastoral ministries. It is pure T laziness and complacency in the pulpit and at Word and Sacrament, at all of it, that has allowed, it is really the quiet majority of steers that are hired hands that have allowed the church to become corrupt. That will just simply go along with the left whenever they cry victim because they don't want to deal with the drama that those crying little baby girls cause. And then I end up looking like a bully. You end up being accused of being a bully for the same reason. Now, the thing is you have been in the military for so long that you just shake it off. And I mean, I'm not just, Donald, you spent the majority of your ministry in an entirely different situation.
And I am told that among the ACNA, REC, and FCE bishops, I am well known.
Oh, I was meaning to tell you.
Feared.
I've got 8 members over the past 3 months from various REC churches that have sort of crept in. And part of it, the big reason for it is they keep moving to this area. The only ACNA church that is here is in Winston, and it looks like a Pentecostal service where they're wearing vestments. You just think the REC is bad. You should see some of these ACNA churches. But that's neither here nor there. But no, what you see with Machen is Machen stood his ground.
Yeah.
He gave the clarion call.
Yep.
He performed the rear guard, because where you say he took his time, I also see him making sure that he can save as many as he can in the process. He stayed in long enough and developed a situation where he could expose as much as he possibly could.
Yeah. His book, Christianity and Liberalism, I am rereading, and it's the high points of the fundamentals.
Right.
And the liberals deny all those, and they're not Christianity.
But this happened in every mainline denomination.
It did.
It happened with the Methodists. It did not happen to us until the merger with the Congregational Christians. Where we had been infiltrated was by the Bardians. We had because of, as much as people rail against, in some circles, Mercersburg theology, we had our controversy in the 1800s with Mercersburg, and the agreement that came out of it was everybody was going to hold to the Heidelberg above all else, because the Mercersburgers could hold to it, the Ursinic, the Low Church, everybody could agree on the Heidelberg.
By the way, I should mention that Reverend George Handy Wales, which he was a super industrial, he just had a work ethic that was marvelous. He taught New Testament classes at Ursinus College, which was German Reformed and Heidelberg Catechism. So here he is. Was a Presbyterian for years at Scott's Presbyterian in Philadelphia until he joined the faculty of Reformed Episcopal Seminary. And he was a Calvinist. And I argue that REC was Calvinistic for 120 years. But I throw that in there that he was more than welcome as a professor at Ursinus, which is about, I don't know, 15, 20 miles north of Philadelphia, maybe.
Yeah. But the thing is ultimately what they end up doing is there's this cadre that gets in, makes themselves look like the victims. The moderates that don't have the testicular fortitude to stand up just don't want the controversy, so they'll make the actual Christians look like bullies. The reason why the Missouri Synod and the Southern Baptists did not initially bend the knee, the reason why you see Seminex, the reason why you see the revolution in the Southern Baptist, is the confessionalists, the ones that were the true confessionalists, refused to be moved. And they called them out at their game. It's why Southeastern Seminary is still in Wake Forest, North Carolina. It's why the Missouri Synod was able to basically, Bob Bierman explained it to me one time because his family was involved in that whole controversy, why they were able to get Seminex out.
Yes, I remember that. I mean, they threw out a bunch of professors and cleaned it up and came back, and they were some of the most scholarly defenders of the infallibility and inerrancy of Scripture.
Right.
They, along with the Presbyterians,
right,
R.P. and Jim Boyce. And then you had Al Mohler at Southern Seminary. He threw out 2/3 of the professors.
Right.
And then they did the same down at Southwestern in Fort Worth. I heard reports that 2/3 of the doctoral students and professors were all neo-Orthodox.
Right.
They cleaned that place up through that Dr. Criswell of Dallas. Criswell.
But my point is the two success cases shows what has to be done.
Clean up.
Machen knew he had lost whenever they put them on the board of trustees at Princeton.
Yep. Yet he stayed.
But that was when he knew the battle was that he had lost the war.
Yeah.
That was when he started his process of creating what would become the OPC. He starts the Independent Mission Society. If you read between the lines in Machen's life, it is after that he starts a calculated retreat, to use military terms. He saves as much as possible after that. Because once the trustees had been admitted to the board, he knew he couldn't fix anything.
Yep. With Charles Erdman leading the charge.
Right.
And being, as Francis Patton said of him, that Charles Erdman tolerated doctrinal error.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is if we want to save our churches, the only way we can do it is to put the upper levels of the denomination and the seminaries to the fire. We have to test them. And it's got to come from the bottom up. Are you willing to lay your hand on the Bible and say you subscribe without reservation to
Yes.
these documents?
They have to do that at Westminster annually. All the professors have to swear ex animo from
And,
without
and
reservation.
and is there an investigation of their writings and are they held accountable to what they write and what they put out in correlation with that subscription?
I don't think so. I think they're so wonky up there.
Because people can lie and do it.
Yeah.
You've got to hold them accountable.
That's what happened.
Because
Peter Enns, he was
Mhm.
on faculty there and he was starting to teach liberalism. They sniffed him out, kicked him out. The same with Dr. Philip Edgecombe Hughes. He was there for years and years and years. I had him for 2 years, THM level courses in Greek. And at the end of his career, he finally came out and said he was an annihilationist. And the faculty said, you got to go. And he was okay with that. He left quietly, amicably, and retired, and then got abused and mistreated by the bishop of Philadelphia, who called him the evangelical mafia don. He had buried his wife in the cemetery of St. John's Episcopal in
Mhm.
It's up maybe 8, 10 miles from downtown Philadelphia, out where it's out close to Westminster Seminary. In fact, he was the associate minister while doing the theology thing at Westminster. He buried his wife in the cemetery. Well, it came and they had a little he built a little gardenette thing, memorial,
Mhm.
and he was going to be buried next to her. Well, he dies, and the bishop denies him a place to be buried next to his wife. So his daughter had to disinter her mother and bury both of them out at a cemetery up the road, a non-church civilian cemetery. It was disgraceful what Bishop Benison did.
Why did he not get defrocked for that?
Well,
I mean,
steers
I'm
clear.
sorry, that's actually beyond the pale.
Yeah, I mean, he'd been in the Church of England since he was a kid. His orders were received. He was allowed. He taught variously at Trinity in Ambridge. He flew out there. I met him in the Union train station in Washington, D.C. He was passing through and was headed to Arlington, Virginia to teach or give a lecture at Virginia Seminary. I mean, he was well known and respected as a scholar.
Well, I've been thinking about this sort of correlates with a whole issue that you have brought up with the Anglicans and the Episcopalians, and you said it's why you don't buy into bishops.
I'm
But
done with bishops.
no, and I understand that. And I'm not trying to convince you otherwise as I say this. But Donald, as someone who has served in all three forms of polity, because I have served churches with congregational polity, I have served churches with presbyterial polity, and I have served churches with Episcopal polity. I am going to tell you the problem is the same in all three of them. And ultimately, the problem is there is no accountability for those that make it to the higher levels. And that lack of accountability stems from what I like to call professional politicians, people who have not served churches that just go into academic and executive positions.
Yep.
And it comes from those in positions of authority are the ones that establish and enforce the rules. If you want to stop, and this is what happened with both the Southern Baptist and with the LCMS. If you want to stop.
I've got someone at the door. Just a second.
Okay, it's no problem.
Hang on.
Hi, sorry. The water is on. Can you turn that off in 1 hour?
The electric thing?
No, the water. Here.
Oh, the hose, I got you.
Wow.
Wow, okay. Or it's the pool guy. We got an in-ground pool out back and they're cleaning it up and
You just can't get away from water, Donald.
yeah. We have
All
it for got it for the kids and the grandkids.
But if you want to stop the rot and the corruption, it has to occur from the bottom up. It will never come from the top down. In the UCC, the E&R church had not gone progressive because we had had our issues settled out early on with the Mercersburg movement. Because basically with the E&R merger, ultimately the R's ended up taking over everything relatively rapidly anyway. We had a better structure than they did. So we ended up assuming the majority of the positions of authority, and we took over both of the seminaries. Because see, they ended up merging Ursinus into Eden as soon as it happened. And what happened is the professors at Ursinus ended up basically taking over Eden. But what we had was some neo-Orthodox floating around. So we had the neighbors and we had them.
Oh, Niebuhr was with you folks?
Both of the neighbors, they come out of the East.
Oh.
But HRN Reinhold.
Okay, gotcha. One of them had a church in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken, in World War II.
I think it was Reinhold.
Maybe, okay.
But anyway.
Beautiful church, by the way.
Yes. But what ended up happening after the merger with the Congregationalists, they were meeting in the old E&R headquarters in New York. Because the Congregationalists did not have a central place of authority. Well, the Congregationalists ended up throwing a fit and saying they needed equal representation. They convinced the UCC to move the headquarters from New York to Cleveland to create a independent UCC headquarters. They chose Cleveland because Cleveland had representatives of all four of the predecessor denominations in the city. And what the progressives did is in the move, they purged all of the old guard out. They made the move far enough that the ones that had held the United Church of Christ to a confessional standard, even the neo-Orthodox that held to confessional standards. Believe it or not, there were some. That's a whole nother argument for another time. But what the liberals did is they purged the leadership. They took over the leadership in the move, and then they boiled the frog with the congregations to the point that the congregations did not know how progressive the United Church of Christ was until it was too late. They told us in seminary, lie to your congregation about what you believe. You think I'm joking, Don? They said, my New Testament professor, and I'll name names, Dr. Greg Carey, said that only a fool would believe that Jesus was anything more than an apocalyptic prophet. And that the supernatural was a bunch of bullshit. Pardon my language, that's his words to our New Testament class in 2001. When I was taking Jesus and the Gospels. I ended up getting thrown out of that class. Greg Carey tried to get me kicked out of seminary. I petitioned. He said he would never allow me in his class. So the trustees of the school had to intervene, and I was allowed to do the readings and write the papers. I just didn't have to go to his classes after that. And I had an independent proctor grade my papers because I said I was under duress. I played their game against him. I said he had oppressed me, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, yeah.
I know that. But
What a devil.
we were told by him, by the Old Testament professor, that if you go in and start talking to your congregation about J, E, P, and D, that you'll get fired. So you need to just lie to them and say that you believe God inspired it and Moses wrote it as a whole book. You've got to stand up there and lie to them about who Jesus really is, because they're ignorant laity.
Well, it's like Bishop Buddha.
Yeah.
Budde. I wrote a takedown letter of her. I don't know if you got that or not.
I got it. We talked about it.
Oh, okay. Well, she came out and said the resurrection is an outlandish proposition.
Right.
The resurrection is entering into some kind of new elevated mood or something.
Right.
A very Boltmanian.
But
unbelievable. She's a bishop.
Right. But the thing is the problem always starts at the top. The Auburn Affirmation was created by Presbyterian pastors, not by laity.
And by
seminary
one man
professors
in particular, with 10 or 11 others, and then they got them to sign off. It took them a year to get 1,274 signatures.
Right. But ultimately, the rot is at the top, and it doesn't matter what polity you ascribe to. It always starts at the top because the laity are sheep. Jesus talks about this in the Bible.
The one man, his name comes back to me, Clarence McCartney, Princetonian, a Westminster Confession man. He was like Machen, but he refused to come out, and he stayed in, fearing what was going to happen to the denomination, which ultimately did happen.
So he was a steer.
He was afraid to stand up and come out. And he could have, in one of the richest churches in the nation, First Presbyterian Pittsburgh, built with, I want to say, Vanderbilt money, one of the big, may have been Rockefeller. Anyways, it's big, beautiful, they were a moneyed bunch of people.
But I guess what I'm saying, Donald,
he could have come out, but didn't.
Is I respect your scriptural argument against the office of bishops. I'm not even going to get it. I can respect that. I've served in all three forms of polity. I know the arguments for all three of them. What I'm telling you is we spend all this time sitting around and arguing about scripture rightfully because it is the truth. Our enemy doesn't care about scripture and will use any means necessary to gain power, because the devil is like a roaring lion that prowls around looking for whom he may devour.
You know, I'm thinking about Fenwicked and the Free Church of England, and he has spent 25 years talking about the office of bishop. It is one great big distraction from the Trinity.
Right.
And if he had focused his mind on the Trinity, he would have talked about the episcopacy being a very, very humble role of service, of preaching, of teaching, and it would have sold more widely because the meekness and gentleness of Jesus would have been evident. But he rather sat around for 25 years talking about himself and power and abusing anybody who disagreed with him. What I'm saying is that at the top, he was engaged, whether he was deceived or not deceived, largely in a game of distraction.
The PCUSA doesn't have bishops. The UCC doesn't have bishops. The American Baptist Church doesn't have bishops,
Gotcha.
but they are every bit as corrupt, destructive, and demonic as the TEC or any of the rest of the stuff. The problem is not the polity. The problem is these bad intended players will always creep to the top. They will always infiltrate. They will always get into the seminaries. They will get into the schools. It's like Lennon said, you give me a child for 5 years, I will have him for the rest of his life.
The Roman Catholics said that too.
Right. You get the pastors in their training. What are you going to do?
Gotcha.
And then what are the pastors going to do? They're going to go out to their congregations using their nefarious techniques they've been taught. And
I'll never forget. I was up at the Pentagon. I don't know for what, but I was could have come home that Friday, but decided to stay over the weekend in Fredericksburg, Virginia. Called my wife. She's okay with it, blah, blah, blah. I get to the Church of the Advent, I think it is, right downtown Fredericksburg, site of the great Civil War battle in 1862. And I go to church. Nice little blue-haired lady shows me around early, all the nice windows they got. The minister gets up. It's Ascension Sunday, so it's Acts 1 to 11.
right.
And he says, the ascension as it was usually taught in the past of Jesus bodily ascending into heaven, we no longer believe that anymore. We're in the that would have been the 20th century. We've come to go beyond that, and Jesus rises in our hearts. And it was pure Boltmanian crap. So I was with the Marines at the time, short hair, in shape, run 3-4 miles a day, sometimes 5 or 6. Long 20-mile marches with 100 pounds on my back. I'm glad those days are over. Anyways, I'm sitting in there, I looked like a Marine I may have had the uniform on. I don't remember. I may have been in uniform. And I came to the back to shake his hand. And I said to him, I came here thought I'd hear a sermon today. But within the first 5 minutes, it was clear I wasn't going to get a sermon. And then I proceeded to walk out, and the rector in his girly outfit chases me out to the front and does some small talk. But my point is that he learned that in seminary.
Right.
And brought that to the congregation. And the little weaklings in the congregation don't have the potency, power, or pull to get rid of that kind of stuff.
But Donald, it's because they're sheep. The clergy are called to be shepherds.
Yeah.
But what we have are hired hands. That guy in Pittsburgh was a hired hand, not a shepherd. If he were a shepherd, he would have defended his flock by taking them out.
Yeah.
But he was scared of the controversy. Shepherds cannot be afraid. David faced, all right, you want to talk about a Bible story that applies to pastors that never gets talked about? Look at the story of David and Goliath. When Goliath was calling out the Israelites, would any of the well-armored, well-trained men stand up to him?
Yep.
No, only this little shepherd boy. But the shepherd boy says, I don't need the armor. I don't need the weapons. I have protected my flock from bears and from lions using a staff and a sling. And he goes out with the Lord's power and he confronts Goliath and he kills the giant. We as clergy are called to be David. We are called to be the shepherd. Does it mean we're never going to mess up? Well, guess what? David messed up a lot, but when he messed up, he repented, he turned from his sin, and he tried to make up for it. David was always faithful to God and to God's will. These men, I got in a strange way, I got into this argument at a minister's meeting one time. And I said, I have very little respect and no belief in true calling if a pastor comes to a church with a parsonage and demands a housing allowance. And they said, that seems like a silly thing. I said, it's not a silly thing. You are the pastor. You are no longer your own. You belong to God. And everything you do should be sublimating your will and your desires to what God would have you do. God has that parsonage. God has you on that property because you are the face of Christ in some way to that congregation. You belong there. I get asked all the time. This I get all the time. Do I own any other clothes? The answer to that is no. It's sort of like I got one white button-down shirt and a maroon tie in case I have to act as a pallbearer at a funeral somewhere. I got two bowling shirts for when me and my wife go out on dates. And I've got my workout clothes. Everything else is my clerics. I was asked why. Well, the reason why is this. Am I ever not a pastor?
That sounds kind of like my grandpa Veitch. He wore a suit, shirt, and tie. He was an accountant for the
Yep.
Canadian National Railways. And he was like that on the weekends. On Saturday, all day Sunday, he would sit at the dinner table in the evening in a shirt and tie. And that's just the way he traveled. You know, it was a businessman suit, but he didn't get into leisure clothes and that kind of thing.
No.
Even when he went on vacation, he's driving in a car to Washington, D.C. or to Florida with the family. He's in a suit and tie shirt. I've got the videos or the cameras of my grandpa Veitch walking out of the U.S. Capitol on his vacation, suit, tie, everything. Grandma the same way, all dressed up.
My great grandpa Claude Felter always had a pair of overalls on every day. He was a farmer.
Yeah.
He owned 100 and some acres. Even on Sunday when he went to church, he put a shirt and tie on, but he put the overalls on over it. My grandmother asked him one time why. He said, because I'm always a farmer.
Yeah, I got you.
I'm always a pastor. There is, and if you are truly called to the pastoral ministry, number one, there is no retirement. You may not, I don't like that word retirement to start with because I don't find it to be a biblical word. I believe that there is a time in your life that you need to start recognizing your limitations. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
You may not be able to do everything you used to, but retirement is like a death sentence. You never stop. If you're a pastor, Donald, you retired, and what have you done? You would look at the wall behind you. You have devoted yourself, lock, stock, and barrel. You're not actually retired, Donald. You just changed the focus of your work.
Yeah, I agree. And I am a resource for my local pastor who him and I talk, and he's delighted to interact with me because I'm trained. Great church and great sermons, and he does his homework. He's a great pastor. I missed the prayer book, but I got a confession.
Right. But my point is, and if you've gotten into Alinsky, I would like next week to talk about Alinsky.
Okay.
Because Alinsky actually gives the model of how they infiltrate, if that makes any sense.
Do you think Aimee Byrd was using those principles? I don't think she has read him or conscious of it, but yet doing it.
I would say this. I would say it has so infiltrated higher education.
Oh.
to where it's almost just in the water. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I gotcha.
I don't think she realizes, but I don't know how far you've gotten into the book. But
I
if
picked
if
it up
you,
yet.
if you look at women's studies or at LGBT studies or at African American studies program, all these weird programs that weren't there when you went to college,
Right.
they are all literally based off of Valinsky's program. They're all literally manifestations of social Marxism or cultural Marxism.
You know, I got kind of a rude awakening. I don't know, back in the mid 70s when I was at Wayne State University undergraduate. And I came to the door and opened the door for a girl behind me. And she got really rude. I can do that myself, blah, 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 blah. I thought I'm just being polite.
Right.
Yet she rips me a new one. And I thought, what was that all about? But
It's
it was just the beginning. They were doing all
it
kinds
was
of marches and
well, it was the infiltration of cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is basically a manifestation of postmodern philosophy. Derrida, Foucault, all of them, which is where relativism and subjectivism comes from. This is a big picture thing, and we got to go, but I want to get this off my chest before we do. People who live in a culture do not actually see it most of the time because what they are is like a fish swimming in a fishbowl. Does the goldfish in your fishbowl realize he's swimming in water?
gotcha.
So, all right. We have both experienced, you did in a very personal way with the military, the rise of the neocons and the neoliberals. You know what I'm talking about when I say that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
The neoconservatives, the neoliberals. An example of a neocon would be George W. Bush's vice president. What is his name? Cheney, Dick Cheney.
Yes.
Okay. An example of a neoliberal would be Bill and Hillary Clinton. What nobody wants to talk about is both schools of thought have their roots in the Trotskyites. Trotsky, you know who Trotsky is, right?
The name, yeah.
Trotsky was a Menshevik that became a Bolshevik under Lenin. He is the one that Lenin thought would end up taking over the Soviet Union upon Lenin's death. Stalin had other plans, though, and drove Trotsky out. Trotsky's ideology was based on global communism, whereas Stalin's was based on communism in one country. And if you look through Stalin's career, even though he did expand the Iron Curtain and all of that, a lot of that was done for defensive purposes. Stalin was more interested in strengthening communism in Russia. Trotsky, at the end of World War I, immediately invaded Poland. You can go back and read it. It's why Stalin got rid of him as soon as he took power. Trotsky was pushing for the worldwide revolution. So Trotsky ends up fleeing to Mexico, where he has an affair with Frida Kahlo and all that, the artist and all this. But Trotsky collected a group of intellectuals around him in Mexico. And that group of intellectuals, after Stalin had Trotsky assassinated, broke into three pieces. All of them are dedicated to world revolution, but in different ways. There was the straight-on Orthodox socialist branch of it, but the neocons and the neoliberals both grew out of it. If you will look from Reagan on, all of which were neocons, the Bushes, Cheneys, Reagan, all of them. they were always using slogans that they borrowed from actually Woodrow Wilson originally, making the world safe for democracy. We're going to spread democracy. Basically, what that is a socialist slogan retooled to be used because they wanted, when you look at the neoliberals ultimately wanted cultural Marxism attached to a capitalist economic policy. If you don't believe me, who was it that wrote NAFTA and who was it that signed NAFTA? George H.W. Bush wrote NAFTA. Bill Clinton signed it. The first George Bush was a neocon. Bill Clinton was a neoliberal, but they shared a common goal of a world revolution. It may not have looked like what Trotsky initially envisaged, but it was working to the same ends and the same goals. Because what did NAFTA do? NAFTA moved America away from an economic powerhouse. And I'm not doing this from a Trump MAGA point. I'm doing it from I lived through it. Lexington, when I was growing up, Donald, hummed 24/7. The entire downtown smelled of varnish and barbecue smoke because the furniture factories went 24/7. Within
those all go south to Mexico?
When NAFTA was signed, within 6 months, they were all closed.
Exactly like, I forget the guy's name who ran, George Perrin, I think his name was.
Right.
He said you're going to hear a huge sucking sound going south. And he, as a billionaire, understood the economics of what NAFTA meant.
But it's because they're Trotskyite globalists. Whether they be neocons or neoliberals, why is it important? Why does anybody in our government give two flips about the Ukraine? What does the Ukraine do for us?
Nothing.
Why were we involved in Iraq and all of that to start with?
Yeah.
I mean, if you go through, think America has been in a steady state of war, one way, shape, or form ever since World War II. It has been never ceasing. Why? Because the neocons and the neoliberals really are trying to create a worldwide revolution. Why did we pay for Europe's military for 70 years? I'm not talking about Trump's point. I'm talking about in reality. Why did we pay for it? I mean, at least when the Soviet Union fell, what was the point in us backing up NATO? What do we get out of it?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's past time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tuesday, I'll try to get Alinsky done by then.
All right. But we'll talk at you later, Don. I want you to think about that in our political scene, that basically what has happened in the church and the seminaries and all of that has happened in politics.
Okay.
And it has so infiltrated our culture to the point where, the other thing that I came across, and I'm going to say this, I keep saying I'm going to shut up. If you map the modern progressive parties versus the modern MAGA parties on state maps across the United States, the progressives match up with the New England Puritans almost point from point, even with the West Coast concentrations, whereas the MAGA map up with the Second Great Awakening.
By the way, I came across an article by Charles Hodge. The First Great Awakening. And it's 60 pages long. I think it was in the Princeton Theological Review, their publication. I haven't read it, but that's with Jonathan Edwards and Whitefield and Wesley. And I'd like to get his take on that, because Jonathan.
Actually, I would be interested in hearing it also.
I'm done with Jonathan Edwards, by the way. I had to take an elective seminar class on Jonathan Edwards. I read everything he wrote, a bunch of his sermons and blah, blah, blah.
I don't understand the fascination with him.
Well, the lecturer, teacher, had done his PhD dissertation on Jonathan Edwards at University of Penn, and he ran the seminar. And Jonathan Edwards was kind of a big name, like with Dr. John Gerstner, who loved him.
Right.
At the end of the seminar, I was done with Jonathan Edwards. I didn't want anything to do with him. He did go down to Princeton. I think he was the president of Princeton.
He died in Princeton because he ate some bad fruit. He got poisoned.
He's buried over in the Witherspoon Cemetery alongside or near to John Witherspoon. All the greats are in that cemetery. Anyways, that's the first Great Awakening, not the second.
Right.
Which I'd like to explore more with you as well, because you've referenced that numerous times.
New lights versus the old lights.
Yeah. And I think there's an article by Hodge defending the old lights that I can get as well. I've not read that. Anyways.
Okay, I'm sorry, Donald. I've prattled on too long today.
Oh, it's good, and I'll see you Tuesday, God willing.
All right. Lord wills and the creeks don't rise.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.